Hello ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary compatriots. With the modern era of Doctor Who having seemingly come to an end, I've recently been thinking a lot about previous eras of the show, particularly the 13th Doctors, which I tend to look back on with a lot of mixed emotions, which is fitting given that Jodie Whittaker's 3-season run is a real mixed bag to begin with. From the less than favorably reviewed Series 11, which I personally think received a lot of undeserved hate, to the, shall we say, overstuffed Series 13, there is one season in the middle that really stands out to me. Not for what it was, but for what it could have been. Series 12 of Doctor Who is the definition of wasted potential. The series started off strong with a surprise reintroduction of the Master, whom we last saw suffer their presumed demise in the Series 10 finale. Already you're met with a ton of questions, like how did they survive, what are they doing here? The second episode follows suit by ending with the major reveal that Gallifrey has been destroyed. Again, for real this time, they swear. And from that point on, the series continues adding shocking twists into practically every episode. The return of Jack Harkness, the lone Cyberman, the timeless child, hell, even an unknown incarnation of the Doctor themselves makes an appearance. It just keeps building and building, and it's all very exciting. But then you realize something. These seasons aren't very long. The finale is quickly approaching, and you can't help but ask yourself, how are they ever gonna pull this off? The answer is that they simply couldn't. Chibnall introduced far too many variables that each demanded their own satisfying payoff, and that just couldn't be done. Or could it? What if instead of the timeless child reveal that everybody loved, there was another reason why all of these new characters and concepts were being introduced all at the same time? Something that could explain both in-universe and in real life why everything is so off. What if Series 12 took place in a parallel universe? Parallel universes are not a new concept for Doctor Who. The Third Doctor once went sideways in time and ended up in a world where Britain was an authoritarian superpower run by a fascist regime that maintained its power through fear and depression. I know, wild. But in more recent memory, the 10th Doctor's era made the concept of alternate realities a much bigger deal. They exist. You can visit them. You can even leave your own universe behind and take the place of your deceased doppelganger when you have nothing left to live for in your reality. In short, this is a canon thing that exists in the show and is therefore a viable option for explaining away massive plot holes. So let's break this down and I'll explain how each major issue of Series 12 could have been fixed by simply taking place on a parallel Earth. First things first, we're gonna need to tweak a few story beats for this to make sense. To do that, we'll start with the series premiere, Spyfall. So in this episode, the Master is in league with Mark Zuckerberg and an alien race called the Cjbeards. This is the only appearance of the Cjbeards in the show, and the two-part story never really makes it clear what their abilities or motivations are, aside from wanting to take over the universe. Real original, guys. Here's where I think the first major change to Series 12 could be made. The Cjbeards are shown to have the ability to transport people through time and between dimensions. Now, if you substitute dimension hopping for universe hopping and make the Cjbeards sort of a parallel universe weeping angel of sorts, sending unsuspecting victims to alternate realities in order to feed off their energy, it would give them much more relevance to the story, as well as some agency of their own, rather than being just another species in the long list of uneasy alliances the Master has made over the years. Take for instance this scene in Spyfall Part 1, where one of the Cjbeards tries entering the TARDIS. The Doctor notes that this shouldn't be possible, they shouldn't be able to do that, but they manage to shake it off and the fam get away unscathed. Now on its own, this scene stands as a decent and inoffensive action moment that has no real bearing on the plot besides indicating that this creature is capable of doing things the Doctor thinks is impossible. However, if we workshop this a bit, we can make this scene a lot more impactful to our overarching narrative. By giving the Cjbeards the ability to transport things between universes, we make it so that this scene serves as the exact moment where the TARDIS crew is sent to our hypothetical parallel Earth. It seems inconsequential at first, just another ordinary action set piece. But later on, when things start getting a bit weird, it starts to make a lot more sense and have a lot more purpose. These beings would be the catalyst for the whole series. They may only appear in this one episode, but their impact would be felt throughout, and they become much more memorable because of it. Some of the more episodic stories can remain relatively unchanged. Orphan 55 brings up the possibility of the future being changed by choices made in the present, but I think that falls into more of an alternate timeline category than parallel universes. I don't know, it's all very wibbly-wobbly. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the more notable moments from Series 12 and see if we can mold them to fit my literal Doctor Who AU. Starting with the very first thing that happens in Series 12 is a surprise run-in with the Master, now played by Sacha Dhawan. The Doctor, of course, doesn't realize he's the Master until he reveals himself to her at the end of the episode. A bit slow on the uptake for the greatest mind in the universe, especially considering the 10th Doctor sounded so sure of himself when he said,
"I'll know him the moment I see him." Time Lords always do.
But of course, there is a canonical reason for this brief lapse in judgment.
I am an idiot.
Now, let's really think about the dynamic between these two in this scene. The Master is so full of hatred for the Doctor, which isn't necessarily new, but it does raise a few questions regarding this incarnation's placement in the timeline. We have to ask something that evidently didn't get brought up in the writer's room. Where did this Master come from? The last time we saw the Master, they'd essentially committed a double suicide. We never find out what happens after that. Even the Doctor's aware of this impossibility when she remarks,
"He can't be."
Oh, it can be.
And no, I won't be taking Big Finish into account with this theory, because, much like the show, those contradict themselves all the time, and the show should be able to stand on its own 2 feet when it comes to continuity. I mean, this series is complicated enough without introducing Elysian fields and Lumiats. Throughout Jodie's 3-season run, it's never actually established when or how the Master regenerated. Again, this isn't new for Doctor Who. As a matter of fact, in all 60+ years of the show's existence, we've only seen the Master actually regenerate once. What's different about it this time is the character development that Missy went through before her death. She was the first Master to actively want to be good, and she succeeded in that by following the Darth Vader method of doing one good deed and then dying. So if the Master's a good guy now, why is he back to his evil, conniving ways the next time we see him? Some have theorized that this is an incarnation that came before Missy, but with the parallel universe idea, we can explain all of it. This isn't the Master we know and tolerate. This is a completely separate version of the Time Lord that never changed, never grew as a person, never felt the desire to be better. This Master has always been a maniacal son of a bitch, and always will be. Dewan's Master seems genuinely distraught about something, and before leaving the Doctor and her friends to die in a horrible plane wreck, why can't gay people ever flirt normally? Why's it always gotta be shit like this? He delivers a cryptic message.
Everything that you think you know is a lie.
But let's for a second forget about the Timeless Child and imagine that this isn't our Prime Master, but an alternate Master who has some major beef with an alternate Doctor. And either he assumes that this is his Doctor regenerated, or the everything is a lie line could be referring to the fact that he knows the Doctor's in the wrong universe. It gives the scene a whole new meaning, and the best part is, kinda works. But why didn't this Master evolve like Missy? Because he didn't have a Doctor to teach him how to be good. In the 5th episode of Series 12, Fugitive of the Judoon, we're given a few big reveals. On first watch, it's the best episode of the Chibnall era because of how exciting it is. On rewatch, however, it's incredibly lackluster because of how disappointing the payoff turned out to be. Certainly the biggest reveal in the episode is the appearance of a previously unseen incarnation of the Doctor as portrayed by Jo Martin. Now, typically this would indicate that she is a future incarnation that we haven't met yet, hence why neither we nor the Doctor recognize her. But the issue with that is that she doesn't recognize the 13th Doctor either. Now, the reasoning Chibnall uses as an attempt to explain this is, and buckle up because this is a doozy, Jo Martin's Doctor, otherwise known as the Fugitive Doctor, is an incarnation that existed pre-First Doctor, who was part of a Time Lord special ops group known as the Division, and the Doctor then had their memory erased of this entire portion of their life and set off to become the First Doctor and begin their adventures as we know them. Sure. But that explanation also falls flat from one big continuity error. The Fugitive Doctor's TARDIS is a police box. Now, anyone who has watched the very first story in Doctor Who history knows that the TARDIS only became a police box when the First Doctor and Susan landed in 1960s England, and it became stuck like that on their first adventure with Ian and Barbara.
It's still a police box. Why hasn't it changed? Dear, dear. How very disturbing.
Not only that, but we see the First Doctor steal the TARDIS in the first place in Series 7. So it's absolutely mind-boggling to think that the Time Lords gave the Doctor a TARDIS during her time with the Division that also, for some reason or another, ended up getting stuck in the same exact form that it would take later on in her life, only for her to have the memory of that TARDIS erased and then steal another one that ends up suffering the same fate.
I can't stand the confusion in my mind!
So with the parallel universe theory in mind, let's take a look at this problem through a different lens, and see if we can clear up a few inconsistencies. If the same is true for the Doctor as it is for the Master, and this is a completely separate version of the character with their own lives and history, then anything could have happened in order to create this colder, more calculating strategist with an apparent lust for blood. The kind of person who doesn't give a second thought to their companion, who just sacrificed his life for them. I mean, think about it. She joined up with an elite group of assassins. She carries a gun, which is something the Doctor steadfastly doesn't do.
No. Guns, never use them.
I never would.
You ain't wearing a gun.
Well, I should hope not. I certainly disapprove of violence.
Something terrible must have happened to make her run away from the Time Lords and become a fugitive to her own people. What could that terrible thing possibly have been? During the Time War, the violence became so horrific that the only way to end it was for the Doctor to blow up their own planet, destroying the Time Lords and the Daleks alike. It was a tragic moment for them, and it haunted them for years to come, until it didn't. In the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor, it's revealed that the Doctor never actually destroyed Gallifrey, but instead froze it to bring back at a later date. So when they find their home planet again in the incredibly underwhelming Hellbent, everything looks okay. So Gallifrey's back, right? Well, no, because apparently the next time the Doctor visits their home, it's blown to smithereens. Time Lords gone, cities eviscerated, and all at the hands of the Master, or so we're told. My fix posits that the Master didn't blow up Gallifrey, and that this isn't a recent development in any way, but is instead the smoking remains of the Doctor's final act of the Time War. This is a universe where the Doctor gave up, where they were cruel and cowardly, where they ended the war without hesitation, and instead of grieving the loss of their birthplace, they became colder, closed off, violent. Perhaps the division was off-planet during this final act, maybe infiltrating Dalek bases on Parallel Skara. But when they heard the news of the Doctor's treason, they sent out forces to hunt them down for punishment. The Doctor ran as fast as they could, but knowing their former employers would never give up the hunt, they ran away to live a human's life on Earth as Ruth the tour guide, in a last-ditch effort to avoid detection. This would explain why Gallifrey is long gone in Series 12, and why the fugitive Doctor is a fugitive in the first place. And I know in the episode the Division don't know about Gallifrey burning, but hey, we're changing things around, so. And adding to that, the buried TARDIS. If some events are the same as our universes, then perhaps the TARDIS got stuck in that state on a previous misadventure, just like our Doctor, and it became so recognizable to the Division that she had to bury it to throw them off her trail. So now that we have a reason for how the Master came back and how Gallifrey got destroyed, and we have a more plausible explanation for the fugitive Doctor's existence and characterization, let's take a look at some of the more minor details and inconsistencies, and see how we can fit them into our version of the story as well. Series 12 also introduced a few smaller but still important plot points that came out of nowhere and ended up going nowhere. Most notably is Captain Jack Harkness and AERØHEAD the lone Cyberman. The last time we saw Jack Harkness in Doctor Who, he was in a space cantina mourning the death of his loved ones after Torchwood's Children of Earth. But the last time we see him in-universe is at the end of Torchwood's fourth and final season Miracle Day, and for the most part, this lines up with that continuity. It's just Jack and Gwen against the world.
Gwen Cooper sends her love, by the way. Says she took out a Dalek with a moped and her son's boxing gloves. Woo-hoo!
So it's not Jack's appearance in general that strikes me as odd. Stealing an alien ship and flirting with everyone in sight is par for the course with him. It's the knowledge he passes on to the Doctor through her companions that gets me. The lone Cyberman. What is it, and how does he know what it is? That's never explained, and Jack only gives vague references to it by saying,
Don't give it what it wants. At all costs.
Which the Doctor ends up doing anyway, so the whole warning was kind of pointless in the end. But why does he seem so concerned with the lone Cyberman, to the point of sounding actively terrified of it? When we do meet AERØHEAD, he is certainly terrifying. In fact, he's one of the best original villains the show's had in a long time. He's well designed, intimidating, and he's got a fascinating backstory of being voluntarily converted rather than forcibly, harkening back to the early days of Cybermen, where the whole reason for their existence was to prolong survival. So yeah, he's scary, but he never really does anything. I mean, sure, he chases around our main characters and threatens to kill Percy Shelley, but that's about it. The thing that he wants is called the Cyberium, and it's nothing more than a MacGuffin that's vaguely implied to be useful in eliminating the human race, or whatever these generic big bads always want to do. AERØHEAD is made all the more pointless when he is quickly dispatched by the Master during the finale of Series 12, where he should have had a much bigger part. He's brought back briefly in The Power of the Doctor, where he probably does less than he did in his original appearances, but by that point it's too late anyway. The damage is done. We only know a few things about AERØHEAD. We know he's a zealot who lived through the Cyber Wars, and we know that he can time travel, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't something Cybermen are typically able to do. Unlike the Daleks who can time travel, the reason this show uses for Cybermen showing up at different points in history is simply that this is where humanity will always end up on the brink of destruction.
They happen everywhere there's people. Mondas, Telos, Earth, Planet 14, Marinus.
So his ability to actually time travel is unique to him, unless he's using an emergency temporal shift, of course. It's the little inconsistencies like that that lead me to my final point, and it's a point that I'm pretty sure the higher-ups at the BBC were thinking about when they let the Timeless Children air. The BBC likes money. The Timeless Child reveal opens up Doctor Who to potential spin-off prequel material to add to their already infinite array of audio dramas, novels, and comic books. But I stand firmly with the belief that you would have even more possibilities for spin-offs with this alternate universe angle. Imagine, if you will, a psychopathic master and a cold-blooded doctor going toe-to-toe on a regular basis, having epic battles throughout time and space while leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They have the same belief system as their Prime Universe counterparts, but they go about achieving their goals in vastly different ways. The reason the Master never desired to be good is because their oldest friend is just as ruthless as they are, just with a heightened, warped sense of morality. AERØHEAD could be a constant, dangerous threat to mankind, the Cyberman equivalent to Davros. Think about it. With Skaro and the Daleks being destroyed in the Time War, it's only logical that someone would try to take their place as the deadliest creatures in the universe. I'm picturing the lone Cyberman taking leagues of soldiers on deadly conversion rampages and instilling them with the ability to time travel, all while Torchwood regularly tries and fails to stop them, giving us a reason why Jack is so adamant about stopping this guy. In short,
this is the darkest, most terrible timeline.
Hell, you can even include the Timeless Child too if you're so damn dedicated to the idea. Just make it so that it's this alternate Doctor and not our Doctor. Because if it was our Doctor who was the basis for regeneration and served as the very foundation of Time Lord society, well, that would just be silly. After all, what are the components of an alternate universe in Doctor Who? Well, it's sort of like a funhouse mirror version of our reality. It looks mostly the same, but a few things are drastically different. Whether it be the entirety of UNIT being fascist militants, or your deceased father becoming a world-renowned inventor. There's a deleted scene in Journey's End that features the 10th Doctor on a parallel Earth, giving Rose and 10-2 a piece of the TARDIS, implying that the Doctor doesn't exist in this universe. If there can be a universe where the Doctor just straight up doesn't exist, who's to say there isn't also a universe where the Doctor has a slightly tweaked backstory? So while I personally think that this theory does a pretty good job fixing up some plot holes in Series 12, the BBC chose to go down a different path, and it doesn't look like we'll be revisiting this idea in the future, seeing as they are dead set on returning to the past, going so far as to bring back RTD and refer to the latest series as Season 1. Like, no, actually, that's Season 40, thank you very much. But hey, if they ever do decide to bring the idea back, I support it. I would love to see a timeline where Sacha Dhawan's Master and Joe Martin's Doctor wreak havoc on the universe by trying to destroy each other, while the Division mercilessly hunts for any trace of their Gallifreyan traitor. I want to see a world ravaged by Cybermen that Torchwood tries in vain to save. I want to see our Doctor search for a way to get back to her own timeline. Maybe the Master sabotages all of her escape attempts. Maybe the fugitive Doctor tries to recruit 13 to her cause. The possibilities are endless. Anyway, that's how I think Series 12 could have been a series to remember. And hey, if anyone else digs this idea as much as I do, feel free to flesh it out in your own way, be it fan fiction or some other outlet. This is just a spur of the moment idea that I had, and I wanted to share with my fellow Whovians. And if the BBC does decide to use any of these ideas in the future, please contact me so we can work out payment. See you guys!